Hey gang, welcome to another live episode of TogChat. I'm Joe Edelman, and I'm going to be your host for the next 90 minutes, actually 60 minutes tonight, but I'll explain in a second. We're going to talk about all things photography, and mostly tonight we are going to do photo reviews. So, real quick news for all of you guys. TogChat is going to make a change. I'm still going to do a full 3 hours of TogChat every week here on YouTube. But instead of doing two 90-minute episodes, we're going to break it up and we're going to do three 60-minute episodes. So I'll be here on Monday nights like I have been doing the photo reviews, which is what we're going to do in just a few seconds. I'll be here on Wednesday nights. That's the new one. And Wednesday nights, we're going to bring to YouTube something that I've been doing on Facebook now for about a month and a half that has turned out to be pretty popular. And that is essentially an open mic night for photographers, meaning I'm going to be here to answer your questions. You guys will decide on the topics. You guys will drive the discussion. I will do my best to answer questions that you have and give you advice. And it can be about anything involving photography. So in other words, we can be talking about technical stuff. We might be talking about gear. We might be talking about techniques, working with models, might even be marketing stuff. It's 60 minutes of Q&A from me to you. And then again on Thursday nights, we'll be doing our marketing talk chat where I'll be doing a review of a photographer's website and all of their social media. And we're only going to do one website per video. And that way we're going to be able to do a little bit of a deeper dive yet than what we've been doing so far. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to be kind of the new format. We're going to try this out. I've been surveying a lot of people, talking to a lot of my regulars and getting a sense of what's ultimately going to work best for the channel going forward. And I think that you guys will ultimately enjoy this format, especially for those of you that don't catch it live and kind of catch this stuff on the fly afterwards. I totally understand 90 minutes, that's a lot of content to actually dig through. So I apologize. Hang on a second here. My apologies. All of a sudden, I had extra sound. Like I could hear myself talking back there. That's part of that new setup creeping up and biting me in the butt here. So anyway, guys, listen, I want to dig in with one last piece of information before we hit the photo reviews. If you haven't been to the channel this week, there's the new video. 3 lights, no modifiers. The last frame never went away. Some of you are asking me, what happened to the last frame? We really like getting those Saturday videos. They're back. They never really went away. In order to get all this live stuff up and running and get everything working the way it really needed to, I needed to put a lot more time into that. And there just were not enough hours in a week. But don't worry, the last frame is back. It's going to be here. And we're going to mix it up a little bit, meaning I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing with the last frame. But I'm also inviting some photographers from my Facebook group to let me interview them about some images that they did. And I'm going to present them to you as a learning experience on the last frame. So it's not just going to be all of what Joe does, but it's also going to be what some other photographers have done so that we can look at problem solving, not just from Joe's perspective, but from the perspective of other photographers that are kind of doing the same stuff that you guys are doing. So look for that. That's coming up real soon. Let's dig in to our first review for the evening. So for those of you that have not heard this before, if you would like to have your photograph reviewed, remember you have the option. You can join my Facebook group. The link is in the description section below, and I'll have my assistant Chad paste the link into the chat window there so that you can see it. You are able to post your images in there and have them considered for review here on TogChat, or in the link in the description, there is also a link which is tog.chat/photo review. You can submit your photos directly to have them considered for review here in a live TogChat episode. So we are in the new review screen. Some of you that were here on Thursday night for the marketing review got to see this. Finally, we have a setup where the comments that happen during the feed will remain in the video. So that way, if we wind up having a discussion and folks come back later and watch the video, or if you come back later and watch the video, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, who I'm talking to, all that good stuff. So it's all right here. So this first shot that I have also too, if you guys haven't seen this new setup with Lightroom instead of the way I had been doing it online, all of the text specs are up here in the upper left-hand corner. I'm not going to read them out loud. You can see them. I'll only deal with the text specs if it's something that involves the feedback that I'm going to provide. So to give a little bit of background in the shot, this is obviously done by Andrea from Rome in Italy, which makes me jealous right out of the box. So the goal for this picture, this was meant to be an approachable headshot with friendly, casual clothing for a woman who is some type of a corporate manager who works in diversity. And she needed a new photograph for the phrase that Andrea used here was for her curriculum and her blog. So basically, we are looking for a professional headshot that's going to get used on social media, on a blog, and it was meant to be casual in tone. So that was the purpose behind this shot. So he did the shot outdoors. It's all natural light, done at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Rome, Italy, which, of course, really leaves me feeling no sympathy whatsoever, especially when you hear part of how he solved the problem for his lighting. So he used a soft reflector to fill in a little bit of the shadow on her left side, so that's camera right, and he positioned her, or he had that positioned at about chest level. And then he also used marble columns to bounce the sunlight, which was behind the camera on the left side. Excellent problem solving. I'm immediately seriously jealous that you're able to solve your lighting problems using marble columns. Unfortunately, in Allentown, Pennsylvania, we don't get a whole lot of really cool marble columns here. So very, very good problem solving. His post-processing, still a little bit in a learning curve. So he's trying a lot of different things here. Number one, he did it in Lightroom, but then went into Photoshop for dodging, burning, even a little bit of contouring to enhance the makeup. In fact, he even mentions that he had to download an image from online to be able to kind of see how women do their contouring. And then a little bit of frequency separation with the luminosity level, some color toning, darken a bit of the background, and work on her eyes, and then sharpening. So Andre tells me if he had to shoot it again, he would maybe choose a much simpler background. He's not sure if the bokeh is too much or distracting. So let me start with the bokeh element. I always cringe. You guys that have followed along, you know that whenever I hear that word bokeh, I cringe because I'm worried that I've got somebody that's paying more attention to the background than they are to the foreground. Andre, I will tell you that in this case, I think the bokeh is absolutely awesome. It is not a distraction to me. It is extremely subtle. It really gives some life to the shot. I mean, this is a very attractive woman. She has a very soft, pleasant expression. I would love to see, in a perfect world, and this is something for you to work towards, I'd love to see her expression just a little bit more relaxed. Her lips are slightly pursed. Now, for all of you to be clear, mouth closed is a little different than kind of pressed. So I will tell you guys, start to pay attention to your subjects. 99.999% of the time, if your subject is pressing the lips together, you are not going to have an ideal expression. You're just not. So it's one thing to have the mouth closed, but you've got to be careful about the lips being pressed. This woman doesn't have her lips pressed a lot, so it's not bad, but it's there. There's a little bit of that pursing of the lips, okay? For me, honestly, Andre, I love the colors. The whole idea of the casual clothing thing, obviously we don't see a lot of her clothing, but the scarf, all that, I think you did a wonderful job. I would just encourage you to consider, and you're probably not going to be able to do it with this shot unless you were to do a lot of retouching in the background because there's some vertical lines. But I would ultimately, since it's going to be used for professional purposes, love to see just a little less of the head tilt. I really don't think that it takes a whole lot away from your shot. In other words, I really think that you did a great job and achieved your goal here for what the task was. But I do indeed feel that a little bit less of a tilt is going to make that image even stronger yet. But First and foremost, and I hope all of you see it in this picture, the eyes. The connection with the subject is wonderful. And that's what you want. When you've got that connection right, guys, you can have so many other things not going well in your shot, and who cares? And that's really, overall for me, that's why I don't really care that much about the head tilt. I certainly don't mind any of the bokeh in the background. If I'm getting really, really picky about your background, Andrea, I will tell you that you've got really good contrast and richness on this side, and it gets a little flat on this side. So I know you did a fair amount of post-production, and I know you mentioned you did some darkening in that. So if anything, I would darken this down just to get some of this here as black as what you've got on this side. But again, the only people that are going to notice that are people like me, people like those of you watching. That's going to be a photographer thing. Your subject is not going to care about that at all. I think that, all in all, you did a great job there. And if I were you, I would really be, very happy with what you've got. Okay, so just a quick reminder for you guys here too. If you have not done so already, and if you like what I'm doing, please make it a point to follow me on social media. I'm most active on Twitter and Facebook, and hopefully you're a member of my Facebook group. You can also find me on Instagram. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. That way you will get notifications when there are new videos. And of course, please, that thumbs up button is really, really helpful. And when the video's done, not just here in the chat, but also underneath the video, if you would leave a comment, it would be greatly appreciated. Okay? So next up, let's go to our next shot that we have here. And this picture is from Brita. Brita's in Alberta, Canada. So it's a really cool black and white shot here. So you've got all the specs there. The goal that she was working on with doing this shot was to learn how to play with shadows and learn how to use a gobo. And right out of the box, I would say that she did a very good job of making that work. And we've got some really, really good problem solving. So this is a self-portrait. So not only are we working with crazy lighting and crazy shadows, but it's a self-portrait. So we can't just sit back and look at everything and then direct the subject here. So she did this by hanging a piece of lace between two light stands with clamps. She used one speed light. It's angled just above camera left, so it's angled slightly above her head. It was about 5 feet away from the lace. Now, that's an important factor for those of you that have not tried any of this. And by the way, for those of you that are interested in learning how to use gobos, this video that's on my YouTube channel, the DIY gobo videos, I don't do lace in the video, but it will help you out with a lot of little tips about working with gobos and distances and things like that. So I would encourage you, check it out if you like what Brita's done here and you want to give it a try, because there's definitely some really cool stuff that you can do here. So she's got the light about 5 feet away from the lace. That's important if you want to have detail in the shadows. The further the light is from the lace, the sharper the lines of the shadows will be. The closer it is to the lace, the fuzzier, the blurrier, or for that matter, even then more non-existent the lines will be. So that's an important factor. She had the strobe, it was a speed light, zoomed in all the way to 200 millimeter, and it was aimed between herself and the camera to avoid fall off in the background. So in other words, if the light's here, instead of aiming straight at the camera or straight at the subject, it's aimed so the light's passing just in front of the subject and she's catching the light coming off of it, and that's so that she didn't wind up lighting the background at the same time. So it's basically the edge of the light that's what's lighting her face. The lace itself was only about 6 inches from her face, which means it's just out of frame on camera left. Okay, that's how she got the pattern. So I already mentioned the flash was zoomed to 200 millimeter. The flash was set at about 1/32 or third power. Okay, she did minimal editing because her laptop has died on her. So she tried to get the best camera results she could, and then she actually did her post-production on her phone using Photoshop Fix, which is awesome. Again, problem solving. So she got what she was looking for. She was looking for drama. She wanted some good dynamic range. She learned a lot about keeping things out of the shot that you don't want in the shot, because a lot of times when you're working with stuff like this, it's got to be very close and you've got different angles. You have got to get things pretty tight in terms of threading that needle to be able to get your shot without seeing all of the details. So, I would have to say that Brita, you did a wonderful job on that. If I were to give you any recommendations here, I would suggest, and this is really honestly more opinion than anything else, because there's not a lot that I can give you to say, hey, this is going to take this shot to the next level. I myself find the composition slightly awkward. And what I mean by that is the majority of your face, the portion that's lit, is on the left side of the frame as we look at it. Now, I'm not saying it should be centered. Right away, I know a lot of people are thinking, oh, he's going to say center like a traditional portrait. No, actually, I almost wish that your composition was wider and that there was more negative space on camera right. I think especially with all the drama that's created with the lace and the gobo, I think that would actually be really cool if you had that extra space on camera right. Without it, kind of where it is now, I really wish that she was centered in, or she was centered. You were centered, Brita. Sorry. I wish that you were centered in this composition. Obviously, I'm not going to ding you heavily on that one. This is a self-portrait, so you're also in front of the camera, behind the camera. You're on all sides of the process. Really, I think that you should be very, very happy with the outcome. I think that if we were to open the debate up to enough people, some people would say that they wish the background on camera right was darker. Some people would say that they wish the background on camera left was lighter. That's kind of really very much a personal choice. I actually like the fact that your face is falling off the shadow on camera right, but that background lightens up just enough that we see the silhouette of your head. I think that's very powerful. When you do get your computer back and you're able to work in Photoshop, what I would encourage you to do, though, in this shot is, and honestly, you can do it with the liquify tool. You don't need to use the eraser or the clone stamp. I would take this section of your hair up here where we've got kind of the bumps in that from the hair, and I would smooth those down. Now, you don't want to make it perfectly smooth because then it's going to look completely unnatural at that point. But I would bring those down just a little bit. And again, that's like a real little nitpicky thing, but I think it's something that will add a little bit to, what you're trying to do there. But this is a great first time, a really great first time playing with gobos and especially working with the lace idea. So for those of you that haven't tried it, watch that video. You get a lot of pointers. And then remember the points here that are really key to Brita's picture. Lace is 6 inches from her face. Light is 5 feet away. That's what's allowing that pattern to actually have shape on her face. And again, the fact that this is a self-portrait, bravo, really, really well done. Okay, so our next shot comes to us from Richard in Maple, Ontario. So, and boy, this is old school. We're talking a Nikon D200 here. That's awesome, Richard. So this is a shot, for those of you, I'm sure a lot of you recognize it right away. This was, and Richard was kind enough not to drop another YouTuber's name in my Facebook group, but this is inspired by a video that Gavin Huey did for Adorama, where he did a studio shot and then added the snow part with a spray can and part in Photoshop. So I know a lot of you have seen that video, and I know quite a few of you have actually tried that video. So obviously he did do it indoors. It's not an outdoor shot. The goal was to make it look like it was a dark, snowy night. And, which seems to be a little bit of a theme here, it's a self-portrait, so this is Richard in the picture. The background was simply black linen strung between 2 light stands. He lit this with a Yangwano YN563 in a 44-inch white shoot-through umbrella. Again, one of my favorite lighting modifiers, highly underrated, but simple, easy to use, really can't go wrong. The umbrella is about 2 feet from his face. He had it set, the strobe set at about 1/8 power, but zoomed all the way into 105 millimeter so that it wasn't quite as broad of a light source, which again, great problem solving. So for those of you that haven't done a lot of studio work, just so you're following that piece there, because it's a great solution thing. If you compare, in fact, you can watch my video on light modifiers, and I show you examples of what each of the different modifiers do with regards to a subject and a background. The big challenge when you're working with umbrellas, if you're working in a small space, they tend to throw a lot of light all over the place. They make beautiful light. And you can do pretty much everything with an umbrella that you can do with a softbox, with a beauty dish. It's really not that hard. You have to remember the inverse square law. You have to pay attention to where your light's going, but you can do it. That being said, in order to not have quite as broad a light source and to really keep the light focused a little bit more, Normally, when you would put a speed light on an umbrella, you would want to set that zoom head on the speed light to its widest setting at about 24 millimeters so that it quickly fills the whole umbrella. What Richard has done here is set it at 105 millimeters, so it's keeping the light pretty focused, which means that the bulk of that light is hitting in the middle of the umbrella. So it's not going to throw light as wide, and it's not going to be quite as broad a source. It's going to give a quicker fall off to the light, which you can see here how the light falls off very quickly on his face. So really, really well done in that sense, okay? The post on this shot was Adobe Camera Raw and some Photoshop elements. He did an action, of course, just like the Gavin Hoey video, to add the layers of snow, a little bit of blurring on one of the layers to get the blurrier flakes, some dodge and burn, mainly to darken the far shoulder and the light band of the hat so that it wasn't too bright, because you can see how this band definitely could catch light and really brighten up. Also did some Photoshop clouds to create the fog from the breath and all that. So all that really, really well done. I would say that he followed the steps in that Gavin Hoey video quite well here. So Richard's comments on the shot, the things that he was pleased about, the things that he was not pleased about. Overall, he's happy with the result, especially since he was working in a very small room and really had to deal with light spill because the only modifier he has to work with is the umbrella. And in that case, I would say you absolutely did a great job. He was very happy that he was able to avoid the reflection in the glasses. He watched my recent video, and that helped out. Details, one of the big details that he noticed and he caught before he did the shot, he wore the hat backwards so that you couldn't see the logo in the foreground, which would, of course, had to have been retouched and removed. Things that he would like to do differently. He'd love to have a softbox because it's going to be easier to control the light. His daughter suggested that the shot would be a lot more interesting. Parminda, thank you very, very much for that. I appreciate that. Folks, let me hit pause here real quick and a little tiny commercial, just a few seconds. If you're watching the chat, you can see Parminda's colored bar there at $5. That little dollar sign that you see down in the lower left-hand corner, that's a new YouTube feature. It's called Super Chat. It is a way that you can support your favorite YouTubers doing their live shows. You can donate anywhere from $1 up to $500. And what happens is the more money that you donate, you're allowed more characters, which means you can type a longer question in. And once you hit that $5 mark, you can see up at the top of the chat how Parminda's $5 is pinned up there. It stays pinned up there for a certain period of time. So you are able to ask a question, and I guarantee you any questions that come up in Super Chat, I will answer them. I will either stop immediately and answer the question, or if I think it's going to take a little bit longer, I will answer the question in detail at the end of that TogChat episode. So if you're able to, it's greatly appreciated. Parminda, thank you very, very much. So, Richard's daughter suggested that he might want to add a different background into the shot, maybe some trees or something to get a little bit more of an outdoor feel. And he's a little concerned about the way that the back of the hat kind of falls into the darkness. So all in all, Richard, in terms of doing a self-portrait and in terms of trying this technique that Gavin Hoey had done the video on, I would say that you've done a very, very good job here. There are some things that I think could improve it tremendously. So let me deal with the really nitpicky ones first, and then we'll go for kind of the broader scope. The nitpicky one would be the glasses. I really wish you had the glasses all the way up, and also that you weren't shooting looking down quite as much. I like the down angle. I like the fact that you're all the way on camera left and we've got the negative space on camera right, which is going to lead me to saying that I do agree with your daughter. I think she's very smart. So I'm liking that piece. I just wish that maybe either your chin was up a little bit so that we didn't have those glasses going through the eyes as much. It gives it a very real feel the way it is now. And I'm not saying it would be fake if you brought it up, and I'm not encouraging you to do fake, but I think that it's going to give a little bit more impact. In terms of composition, I just mentioned I like you off center. I like you in the lower part of the frame. I do, however, wish there was just a little bit more at the bottom of the frame, meaning I think you could have definitely afforded to pull back on this a little bit and give it a little bit more breathing room. And then indeed, as your Photoshop skills advance, I would encourage you to either go out and shoot some nighttime scenes, Or at a minimum, go to a stock photo site and buy a nighttime scene. Let me pause there. I know some of you, that will give you heartburn. Like, wait a minute, you would go buy a stock photo and you would put it in your picture as a background? Hell yeah, why not? Number one, the key word in that sentence was buy. In other words, respect copyrights. But that's no different if you think about it. Going out and buying an image and creating a backdrop is no different than going out and buying a painted backdrop, or going out and buying a backdrop that's got an image printed on it. It's the same thing. So one of the great things about this digital technology, and one of the great things about all the effort that so many of you are putting into learning Photoshop and really advancing your skills, is that you can do that. Now, I will give you one tip about that, though. If you are going to start comping backgrounds, in other words, compositing the backgrounds and shooting stuff in your studio, etc., my strong advice to you, because I've done a lot of that. There's a whole section on my website where I've done composited backgrounds. I have always selected the background before I took the photo. If you take a photo, so the thing that I'm begging you, please, if you want to be good at photography, if you want to be consistent at photography, do not be the photographer that takes a boring picture and says, maybe if I switch the background, I can make this more interesting. You might get lucky every now and then, and you might come up with a really interesting shot. In fact, you might come up with a great shot doing that. But that's going to be a little bit of serendipity. Are you going to be able to do that consistently? No. It's kind of like the same idea of fix it in post. Every now and then you might get lucky. But if that's your working MO, you are not going to get consistently good results. So if you're going to comp backgrounds, have the background sitting on a computer screen, or at a minimum on your phone, before you take the main image. That way, you're able to pre-visualize how your lighting should be, how your composition should be. You can kind of get a sense of how does this all need to fit together. It's really, really important. So, obviously I can't make you do it, but I'm telling you, if you want to get consistently good results and you're going to start to wander into that area, and believe me, anybody that tells you you're cheating because you're going to go out and buy a stock photo image for a background, seriously, tell them to get a life, okay? Period. It's done all the time. It's no different than buying a backdrop that's painted or buying a backdrop that's printed. So as long as you're respecting copyrights and paying for it, go for it. Nothing wrong with that. But have the image before you do the shot. It will be a ton better, okay? So Richard, for me, it's that compositional piece. I really wish it was a little bit looser, and your daughter's right. A background would make this very interesting. And that brings me to the one last piece you had of, what about the hat falling off into the background? As it is right now, I like the fact that the hat falls off into the background. Don't get caught off by all the photographers who read the books and come back and say, there's always got to be separation from the subject to the background. No, there doesn't. There simply doesn't. In this case, I think it works wonderfully because the way your lighting is, it's almost like you're coming out of a dark place into the light. So our brains totally expect that fall off. I have no problem with that. That answer might change if you composite in a background, because depending on the background, it might look awkward the way it is. So that's why I say the challenge that you have now is if you're going to put a background in at this point, it's going to be a lot harder to find the perfect background so that your light and everything comes together. But all in all, seriously, for deciding, hey, I'm going to do this self-portrait, I'm going to try what was in this video, I think you did a great job. Okay? All right, so our next shot comes to us from Auckland, New Zealand, so way down under, okay? This is from a gentleman by the name of Rochelle. Kim Hagen, you love this image. Are you talking about the Gavin Hoey one, or are you talking about the girl on the beach that I have on the screen now? I'm curious. So you've got your specs there on the screen. Got a little bit of background in this. Rochelle didn't give me a ton of background, but let me tell you what's here, okay? Number one, he had a good day shooting this image with this young model. They worked on a beach. It was a location shot, okay? And it's important for me to start with that. I know that sounds like a kind of random statement since I'm reviewing photos, but I wanted to start with that statement because that's the statement that Rochelle started with. And you guys will understand in a minute when I get to my comments, okay? He was glad that the sun was behind us and the light was bounced back up from the sea and the sand because that really helped him with lighting. It gave him good fill. The only real issue he had while he was doing this shot was that the tide was rising a little bit, so they managed to get a decent shot before the tide was too high. He did use fill, which was a Yangwano 460 in a little mini octabox on the beach, okay? So the reason why I wanted to read that first statement, in fact, his exact words, it was a great day today here in Auckland and an awesome location to do a shoot with the ever-amazing model, and he also mentioned her name, okay? This, for me, is an example, so get ready. I'm forewarning you. I'm going to upset a few people here. This, for me, is a shot, Rochelle, that, and I've talked about this before with you guys. When you first see this picture, let me back up. When I first saw this picture, I'm a red-blooded guy. My first thought was, wow, gorgeous. And she is. She's gorgeous. She has an incredible body. All that good stuff. So at first pass, the gut instinct is, whoa. And then very, very quickly, a long list of things starts adding up that really make this picture, I'm sorry to say, a big miss. Now, I'm not looking to like rip Rochelle and his picture apart, but I'm hoping, Rochelle, and I know you're going to watch this, I'm hoping that there's a takeaway here that I can impress upon you. And also the rest of you, especially those of you that like to shoot models. And I won't lie, this is a Joe pet peeve, and it's a Joe pet peeve because I've made the same mistake. And I had to kind of learn my way through the mistake. So you guys have heard me talk a lot about the idea that, remember, no one else will have the same experience emotionally, physically, in any way that you did with your photo. Because you, as the photographer, you were there with the girl. You experienced the moment. You created something, accomplished something. Everyone else is just going to look at it as is. So, again, that's why I wanted to start out. You know, Rochelle was clearly very excited because he spent a wonderful day shooting with this young lady. Clearly had a good time. That's the relationship aspect of what we do. That's a big part of why I do what I do. I get to meet all these wonderful people and I get to know them. It's great. But we run into some problems here. So the first problem is we're on a beach. And even though we can't tell it's a beach, we're clearly outdoors. And the girl's like in her underwear. And I'm trying to maybe imagine that could be a bikini bottom. But it kind of doesn't really look like a bikini bottom. It looks like underwear. So she's got a shirt on, not a bikini top and not a bra top. She's got jewelry on. I blew this image way up. It's not a hairband because you guys all know I jump on the hairband thing right away. It's actually not a hairband. It's like some kind of a bracelet that she's wearing, okay? The one hand, oh, and the ring, of course. The one hand makes sense. It's pulling the shirt up. I still don't understand why we're on the beach or out in nature in a pair of underwear with a t-shirt. Or even if it's a bikini bottom and a t-shirt, like the context for me is just completely off. The girl's left hand, which is the camera right hand, is really awkward. It's like, what's going on here? Just kind of hanging out. And her body language is back. And like something's wrong. Like she's trying to get away. There's actually nothing sexy about it. She's very sexy. She's very beautiful. But there's nothing sexy about what she's doing. And then indeed, like I'm slightly mind-boggled trying to figure out how is it that half of her hair is up in the air and the other half isn't? Like it's really localized wind on that beach in New Zealand. So maybe that's a down under thing. I don't know. But I'm not sure how you managed to get wind blowing half of her hair and not all of her hair. So, you know, to me, this is one of those shots that if I take it strictly from a technical standpoint, Rochelle, you did fine with it, okay? In terms of, is this a shot that you would see in a magazine? Like, would this shot make Maxim or that type of thing? No. In terms of, did you have a great time with this young lady? And so she's happy with the picture, you're happy with the picture. Is it a win? Awesome. Like, totally awesome. But I really think that, at the end of the day, the composition is loose on the picture. The body language is very awkward. We've got all that jewelry with it. That jewelry makes no sense in the picture. We've got a necklace, we've got earrings, we've got rings, we've got bracelets. And then she's in her underwear lifting up a shirt. So like I don't get it. Okay? I don't get it. So I think the win here, technical. I would encourage you, especially, and part of the reason why I make an issue out of this, guys, to be fair, it's the dad complex in me. I photograph these young women. I photograph them in lingerie. I photograph them doing nudes. But I also feel that I have a responsibility because there's a reality about these young women. At the ages of 18 to 24, 25 years old, which is the age of most of these young girls that get into modeling, most of us remember being that old. And there's a reality. When we were that old, we had no clue what was going on in our lives. We had no clue where we were going. We thought we knew everything, but we had no idea. So, to me, us old folk with the cameras, we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility not to take advantage of that, and a responsibility to make sure that we are creating images that reflect well. And don't get me wrong, I want to be really clear. I'm not saying there's anything about this image that's like inappropriate or trashy. I do not mean that at all. But I mean, it's kind of gratuitous. There's just not a purpose behind what's happening there. And I'm all for looking at a pretty girl. I'm all for looking at a pretty girl. But the context really needs some work here. So that's why I wanted to talk about the picture, and I wanted to show it, and I hope that you guys will understand. And we can separate here. From a technical aspect, I think there's a win. We need to pay more attention to details. But it's the concept of this shot that just really I struggle with, and I think that we need to put a little bit more effort into there. Okay? All right. Next up, and Kim, I saw that your note was on Richard's image, and I agree. I think he did a really cool job with it. So this shot comes to us from the United States, from Gary Baker. He's out in Cincinnati, Ohio. All these shots, by the way, were also posted in my Facebook group, so hopefully if you're not a member, you'll consider joining. He shot this with a Nikon D3400, a 50mm f1.8 lens. You guys can see all the specs there. So this was an idea that he had seen, and he essentially was trying to create his own version of it, which, great idea, okay? It really was to kind of show off and focus on the ponytail. So he had two flashpoint strobes. Those are the Adorama monolights, the flashpoint 320s. He had one on camera left with a 24 by 36 inch softbox, and he had another flashpoint, a 320M on camera right. Also, they were both 320Ms on camera right with a 40-inch white reflector. And then he also put, a 40-inch white umbrella. And then he also put a reflector below the model to bounce a little bit of light back up, okay? In post-processing, he worked on color, cleaned up the hair a little bit. Both he and the model are happy with the shot. It's what they were going for, and he feels that they accomplished it. What he would like to change, if he could do it again, gotten more different poses with the ponytail, and apparently he's going to shoot with her again, so he hopes to be able to try that. So, Gary, the fact that you had a concept, accomplished what you were after, excellent. My feedback to you, a couple small things, and it really has to do with details, and it has to do with body language pieces, okay? So let's start with details. You're retouching it when you see this image large, and so if you guys want to see the actual image, you can go to my group and you can blow it up so you can see it. It looks to me like you took some flyaways out of the hair down in here, and the hair suddenly gets really soft on the edges down here. It's really crisp up here, and it gets really soft down there. So I have a feeling you probably did it with a soft brush on a clone stamp. And you want it to be kind of consistent. I mean, since you're featuring the hair, in the advertising world, if you're featuring the hair is going to be sharp the whole way down. So I would encourage you to, if you're going to do this concept again, when you go back into the studio next time, number one, in the studio, pay a lot more attention to hair and the flyaways and try to have as few as possible so that when you go into post, you're not having to do that kind of cleanup because it does detract a little bit, okay? Number two, based on what we have in front of us, this choker, pull it tight or retouch it so that it's not sticking out from her neck. Again, that's a detail that in an advertising shot, it's not going to sit out loose like that. It's going to be tight on the neck, okay? The other two things, which are kind of body language things, are both of her arms. So conceptually, I love what you're trying to do here. I think you've got a great idea. I am thrilled that you're going to work with this model again because I would encourage you to do that. And I would encourage you to really try and kind of flush out this whole concept. So first of all, her right hand, which is the back hand here, having the hand wide open and the fingers up here is taking up a lot of space. And it's also very bright. If you look at the skin tone on the inside of her hand compared to the skin tone of her face, big difference. So the simple advice is what you want to do is one of two things. You either want to do something where the hand's kind of in here and it's turned, or if you've got to do it sideways, my honest advice would be have her bring the hand to this side where you can cheat. Instead of going straight to the camera or square to the camera, you can cheat it slightly so that it thins the hand and it makes a more elegant line. And then even if you do this, you can bring it down under. So it's just like that finger's just about to touch. And you're going to get a softer, more elegant line in the process. That would be with the right hand. With the left hand, I really struggle with the fact that she looks like she is disabled and doesn't have a hand. So I would encourage you to potentially, let's say that we're doing this or we're doing this one. I want to make sure you can actually see it. Take the left hand and bring it softly up on the arm here so that it actually creates a line coming up as opposed to just falling off into oblivion. And that's the thing that I think will help at the bottom. So, conceptually, you're right there. I would be careful with your post-processing. And I think one of the things you might want to look into, Gary, is it might be a matter of simply making sure that your monitor is color balanced. She's a little bit of kind of a crazy yellow going on, which, you could use it for effect, but I think that's kind of part of the problem you're running into with the palm being very white and with, the face up here is kind of very yellow. It looks to me like you're over contrast a little bit and your color's off ever so slightly. And then one more thing, Gary, if you're going to do this again and you really, really, really want to accentuate that ponytail, you're really excited about the fact that she's got super, super long hair and can do a ponytail. That's cool. But what you need to have her do is when she does the ponytail, because I'm assuming, I think you said she did it herself, or it doesn't say. So regardless of who's doing the ponytail, whether it's her or with the makeup artist, if you really want to make that ponytail really rock, right now the ponytail is up about here on her head, okay? You want to have them do the ponytail back here. So in other words, that would be moving the ponytail, if you watch my mouse, moving it from here to right here on the back of her head. That way, the ponytail is going to stick away from her head, and you will be able to see the shape of her head and her hair going up, which is going to make the ponytail even more dramatic because it will be completely separated from the head. Okay? RKG Austin, I would say to you that's probably a monitor thing. On this shot that we're looking at, the young lady's hand does look overexposed. The girl on the beach, the exposure was absolutely fine to me. I didn't have any problems with that. It definitely was a lighter exposure that was lower on contrast, and that's okay. I do that a lot, so I have no problem with that. But there was detail throughout all of that image. There is some missing detail in the hand here. And I don't think it was so much of an exposure thing. I really do think it was in the post-processing. That's why I suggested that I think the monitor calibration is potentially off a little bit here. Okay. All right. So, Gary, seriously, you're onto a good thing. You guys have heard me talk about my video before. I've shown you the video, work the shot. I would wholeheartedly encourage you, go back, do it some more, and really tweak it, really fine tune it, and really get into the nitty gritty of the details. I think if you do that, you're going to have like a really, really awesome shot. And the other thing I would encourage you to do is, the more I'm looking at it, in addition to moving that ponytail down, have her arch her back. Just a little bit. You don't want it like leaning way back, but if you're going to crop it right where it is, like you're kind of cropped like right at the top of her butt. So if you're going to crop there, I think you could do, and if you bring that arm up like I suggested, you could do a really cool thing with her like arching her back a little bit. And then the last piece, let's assume that her head stays right where it is. Have her move her eyes just a little higher, and they're going to be bigger. So you'll get more impact out of her eyes, okay? But seriously, great work. I will look forward to seeing your next pass on that, okay? All right, so next up, we've got a shot that comes to us all the way from Monterrey, Mexico. This is from Carlos. You've got your specs there on the screen. So this was a session that he did with a friend who wanted to do some dresses from a local designer. So they used a location that is kind of a mountain that's near the city. There's a bunch of trees, a bunch of vegetation. They did the shot at 4 p.m. in the afternoon when the ambient light was getting, kind of a little bit dim, because the same mountain also starts to kind of hide the sun at that point. So his goal was to highlight the colors of the dress as well as the crown that was made out of the flowers, and obviously good choice of flower colors because it kind of matches the dress and everything that's going on there, okay? He decided to have the model sit on the floor. The dress is very broad at the bottom, and it's got 4 layers of fabric, so like one underneath the other. So he had his wife there as an assistant, and they spread the dress out all around the girl, okay? He used 2 speed lights in 60 by 60 soft boxes to the left and another one to the right of the camera, so 1 speed light in each, sorry. In this particular shot, he decided to shoot at ground level to get a low angle. He is happy with the way it turned out because the colors really jump. The image was processed in Lightroom and then in Photoshop, where he darkened the background to give a more dramatic touch and to make sure that she was indeed the center of attention. What he would change, if he could do it again, is her right hand. So that's the hand on camera left, guys, over here. He feels it looks a little bit too much like a claw. He had some problems with it because of being at floor level and the hand resting on the dress because he didn't want it to be hidden. He wanted to see it. And that was really the thing that challenged him the most. So, interestingly enough, Carlos, for me, I mean, overall, I like your shot. I would question one piece here, and it's not clear to me from your description. So I'm going to give you kind of 2 answers. If this picture was being done for the designer to show off the dress, then I would unfortunately have to say that it missed its mark. The way I'm interpreting your comments are that this one was not for the designer. This was for you and for the model, in which case, cool. The fact that she's sitting down, you've got the dress spread out, because for all the work he did spreading out the dress, obviously we don't really see that in the shot. And certainly if it was a designer, the designer would want to see proportions, so he'd want the girl standing up. So I'm going to go with the idea that it's for you and the model, not the designer. We're cool there. I would say that I would have left the ring out simply because the ring's not really adding anything to the shot. It's a small distraction, but, it's not really adding anything. So I would love to see with your low camera angle, bring her chin down just a little bit. As far as the claw goes, I'm not going to lie to you. I don't have a problem with the claw. I don't see it as a claw. It's sitting in a very natural spot. If you want to make things more elegant, what you want to do is have her slide her hand a little bit further down the leg. And if you have her slide it a little bit further down the leg and turn her fingers out a little bit more towards her toes, at that point, you're going to have a nice fluid line that runs down along the dress and kind of along the side of her body. So, that's one I'm going to say to you. I don't think that the hand really takes a whole lot away from your shot right now. But if you want to give it a little bit more of that elegance, turn those fingers out and slide them down the leg a little bit, and you'll have that. And then, the only other thing, and I haven't tried this beforehand, so we'll try this now and we'll see what happens. I want to pull the shadows up a little bit. I've got to be honest with you. I would love to see just a hint more detail in the shot, kind of like I've done here. There's some interesting stuff back there, and the fact that it's kind of so almost like rustic and a little like ugly, and I mean that in a good way, ugly. It kind of, contrasts against the dress. But the great part of it is ugly without being too busy. That's really the best part. So I would encourage you to lighten it up just a little bit. I think that you will like it if you try that. And again, it could potentially be a calibration issue for your monitor because your skin tones on this shot, they're not overexposed, but they're very white. So if you intended them to be very white, that's okay. But I really do. I think you've got actually a wonderful background back here. And I don't mean to put words in your mouth with something that you didn't type. But if I'm making a guess, part of the reason why you wanted to darken the background was because the background's fairly sharp. In other words, your thought process, which is a good thought process, by the way, your thought process was, okay, the background's in focus, so let me darken it. That way it won't be a distraction. There's not enough going on in the background that, in my opinion, you can't lighten it a little bit and get away with it. I think it would look great. And you can see it's just very subtle. I mean, this is where we started right here. Let me get it back down to 0. And, I just brought it up a little. So it's not a huge difference, but it's enough just to give a little something going on back there. Okay? All right. Let me get another one here. And before we run out of time, and I want to try and do a couple questions for you guys at the end of the night. So this shot was done in, let me make sure I got the right, yep, sorry. This shot was done by Trevor in Boston in the UK, not Boston in the US. So you've got all your specs up there at the top. He used a 90 centimeter deep parabolic reflector, one of the ones that has the inner and the outer diffusion, and he's got a Bowens 400 watt second head in it. He had reflectors placed on the left and the right of his subject with the white side towards her, and then he had a further reflector used below to fill in underneath the chin. So basically creating a little white box around 3 sides of her, and then the one light with the parabolic reflector. This was just for a fun shoot. He actually does a lot of photography as treatment for his PTSD. Very cool. So if he could shoot it again, he'd use a tripod instead of hand holding, because even at 1/200th of a second, he had some images with a tiny bit of blur due to camera shake. So I will say, Trevor, as far as the camera shake thing goes, if you had blur, it wasn't actually because of camera shake. It was because of something that you were doing where your autofocus missed. Because even though you were at a 200th of a second, you're shooting with strobe heads at f10 ISO 100. So unless you were outside shooting this in daylight, which I really don't think you were, the ambient light's not a factor here at all. So that doesn't mean that you can't get some slightly blurry images, but in all likelihood, it's not going to be an issue with camera motion. So I would experiment a little bit more. I would love to be wrong, but I don't think I am. Experiment a little bit more. I think there's some stuff going on maybe with technique there. Possibly you're doing focus and recompose, that type of stuff. I'm sorry to say, if you're doing that, you could be just soft enough that it looks like camera motion, but it's really not. Okay? So overall, I love this shot. Overall, I do have one big issue and one minor issue. So the thing that I love about this, number one, is this young lady is beautiful. Number two, I think your lighting choice was excellent, especially for her skin tone. For the hair, you left the hair dark. It's not quite as dark as the background, but your reflectors brought in just enough of a fill to keep the detail in that hair. Brilliantly done. Very, very good. My big beef, Trevor, and part of this is personal opinion. Part of it, though, is science that works, okay? I would really love to see her eyes lined up with her nose. So her face is here, but her pupils are up here. So it's like she's awkwardly looking further away than her face. If she were looking here and her eyes were looking here, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, Trevor. I'd rather see her looking at the camera. This young lady is gorgeous. But if we're going to do the side thing, line her eyes up with the nose. In other words, they should be here instead of here, okay? If you do that, you're going to get a ton more impact out of this. And this girl's got it. Like, I mean, she's gorgeous. The minor things, I hate the earrings, but fortunately they make such a small statement. we can let that slide and we can ignore them. But really, really, really important, those eyes. So, Trevor, I'm going to tell you, if you have the opportunity to get this young lady back, believe me, I would consider this young lady to be great therapy for PTSD in any form. She's gorgeous. So she's a great subject. And so, yeah, I mean, I would say absolutely try and get her back in front of your camera. But work with those eyes, line them up. I have a video on my YouTube channel. It's called It's All About the Eyes. It's an older one. It's about 6 years old, but it goes into great detail on all of this, and we'll kind of break it down. It doesn't, and it's not a science-based video. So there's a lot of, and I've been talking about this a lot lately, there's a lot of new science that's out, a lot of research. My wife's been collecting it for me. For those of you that haven't heard me talk about it before, my wife is a PhD in cognitive psychology. So she's a researcher. Fortunately, she's not a shrink. I'd be in a straitjacket by now for sure. But so she kind of keeps an eye out for a lot of this stuff for me along the way. And there's a lot of research that talks about the power of having people look at the camera in regards to how will those looking at your picture perceive it, and how long will they look at it. So that's not to say that every single picture you ever take, your subject has to be looking straight at the camera. But along with that research, it's research that shows that having the eyes essentially line up with the nose are always going to give you more impact. And that impact will get people to stare longer. So anyway, something for you to consider. But, all in all, really great shot. I really like what you did with it. So, okay, guys. So we're down to a couple of minutes here. I'm going to run a few minutes over tonight, but I got a couple questions. I saw that Parminder's got one, and since he did a super chat here, I want to make sure that I answer this for him. He's got over 300 gigs worth of pictures on a local machine. He's also using Lightroom to organize all of his pictures. He would like to move all the pictures to a network server and then have Backblaze back up the network server to the cloud. Lightroom won't work on a network, only a local hard drive. That means I have to keep all the files on a local machine. I wanted to use 2 different machines for the same catalog in Lightroom. I'm sure you have a lot of images, and how are you backing up and using a network server? Can you batch file, please? So, wow, okay. So I'm not sure why Lightroom won't work on a network server, but I don't use Lightroom. So, and I see some other people have been, kind of, filtering in some answers. So hopefully they're helping you with that per minute. But I will tell you this, my version is very simple. And it's actually described in the video that I had just a couple weeks back on photo backups. So go check it, because I outline mine with the exact gear that I'm using. I'm using some G drives. So the G-Ray technology G drives. I currently have the 12 terabyte ones, several of them, okay? They are my primary backup, and then I also have a set of Drobos that are my secondary backup in-house, and then I go off-site to Backblaze. I'm not sure, what you haven't given me a reason here for is why you need to have an internal cloud setup. I mean, are you looking to be able to access your images from elsewhere? And then the other flaw in your ointment here, in my opinion, and for those of you that are diehard Lightroom users, please weigh in on this and try and help him out. It would seem to me that at 300 gigabytes, and you're not up to the terabytes yet, so maybe that's not that bad. But as your catalog gets larger, that's when Lightroom slows down. So you're going to want multiple catalogs anyway. I don't know anyone with a substantial database of images that keeps them all in one catalog. I don't think that that's actually possible to do because it's just going to run really slow. But I have to be honest. Unfortunately, I'm not a super tech guy at all. In fact, as I mentioned in that video, for the hardcore computer people, their head gets really pained when they read my process, because I don't do the 3-2-1, I do a 2-2. I don't feel that there's any reason to have the redundancy or dual redundancy in-house. I have redundancy, but I don't need dual redundancy. So I'd be curious to know a little bit more about why you don't, or why you're using the cloud as opposed to just using hard drives. And Parminder, I think you're a member of my group. So by all means, I mean, please continue this discussion in the group, and I will do my best to, try and help you out and get you source some good information. But I know in the group, especially, I know you've gotten some information here, but I know in the group that there are also people that can help you out. So, anyway, that's the best answer I can give you at this point. Jim's got a question. Looked everywhere for dodge and burn technique. It is different from everyone that I would love to see. It is, and dodge and burn. It is different from everyone. The one I would love to see is yours. Would you do a video about it? Jimmy, at some point, I may go ahead and do a video about dodge and burn, but I can tell you mine's like ridiculously simple. And there are videos about it out there. It's one of the older techniques. So I'm using a technique that's been around kind of from the earlier days of Photoshop, not the very early days, but the earlier days, because back in the day, especially prior to Photoshop 6, the dodge and burn tools sucked. And they're still not like amazing, but they're a whole lot better now than what they used to be. So my version is real simple. It's the 50% gray layer. So when I need to dodge and burn, I create a new layer. I set it to soft light. And as soon as you select soft light for the blend mode, it gives you the option to click a checkbox that says fill with 50% gray. Click that box. Then on that layer, and when you see it in the layers palette, it's already filled with gray. If I need to burn something, I use a black brush and I paint. If I need to dodge something, I use a white brush and I paint. So I won't say I'll never do it, but at this stage of the game, I have no immediate plans to do Photoshop tutorials. Unfortunately, I have a finite amount of hours in a week, and when it really comes down to what I can bring to the table, there's a lot of people out there doing really, really good Photoshop tutorials. So I will only do them. One of the things I've been committed to from the very beginning, I will only do a video if I can bring something to the table and do it in a way that nobody else is doing it, so that people can actually learn something from it. There's a lot of noise on YouTube. We all know that. I don't want to add to the noise. I want to be able to bring something a little bit different. But I would tell you the same thing, Jimmy. If you're not already a member of the group, join the group. Bring those questions up in the group, and we get a little bit more discussion, and we'll be able to help you out, in a little bit more detail there. Okay? So listen, gang, this was a good night. I will look forward, I hope, to seeing all of you on Wednesday night. So remember, same time, same place, Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. We'll be back here for a Q&A session. So we've never done one of these on YouTube before. It's going to be the first time. So for those of you that have questions, you got like 2 days. Think of your questions. What do you want me to talk about? What would you like me to discuss? What do you need help with? And you've got 60 minutes Wednesday night. I'm all yours. So in the meantime, gang, get out there and practice. You know the drill, okay? You got to pick up those cameras. You got to use them, because your best shot, it's your next shot. So until next time, gang, please remember, keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.